They just never go away.
Good evening.
A cone head.
Right.
I'd like to call to order the Hampstead Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. It's Wednesday, September 28th, 2022. May we have a roll call, please?
Sharon Callahan.
Here.
Lou Conyer.
Here.
Charlie Obermeyer.
Present.
Deborah Painter.
Here.
Barb Yeager.
Here.
The regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission here at Town Hall is to advise you that members of the Town Council may be present and attendance at the meeting. All persons are reminded that this session is being recorded on tape as required by law for the preservation of records and are asked when providing comment to give their name and address. All persons in attendance are requested to print their name and address and affiliation on the sign-in sheet. May we have first on the agenda minutes approval for the August 24th, 2022 regular commission meeting?
I make a motion to approve.
May I have a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so approved. Next on the agenda, zoning administrator update.
Just forgot. The projects that were mentioned last month are continuing. The grading only at the south section of the North Carroll Business Park, Ridge Engineering, Hans, and the fire department, so everything's moving forward. And next week, the contractor should begin building the retaining wall at the War Memorial Park. That'll finish that portion of that project. And Public Works is renovating the Santa shed. So it's starting to look really nice. And for everybody that keeps asking, Dollar General is planning to rebuild.
Thank goodness.
It appears that they'll have to demolish the building first, down to the pad, and then they can rebuild. So they'll need a demolition permit and go through, permitting to rebuild. It could probably take over a year.
That's crazy.
So sad.
It is sad.
Well, on the good news, the park, the music in the park and the pavilion, absolutely beautiful. We've done a great job. Very proud of us. It looks great.
It does. It looks
Yes,
great.
it does. And I'm very sad, as we all are, about Dollar General and the loss of that for now.
Well, it's sad. People don't understand. There's people in the community that needed to go to the Dollar General. It wasn't just a convenience.
Absolutely,
I
yes. I did.
Just ice cream.
Yes. Okay, is that it, Tammy?
That is it.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, approval of new fencing at 1006 South Main Street. If you would come forward and state your name and address, please.
Hi, Tony Ogden, and the address we're looking at is 1006 South Main. And I'm with Taco Properties.
Okay, so the 4 foot will be in the front and the 6 foot
Along the sides.
sides.
I think I'm missing this one. The sheriff here.
And that is consistent with code. In the front yard, a 4-foot decorative fence is allowed.
Joe, over there.
That's what I was going to ask, okay. Are you using this fencing, this privacy fencing in the back?
Correct.
It's beautiful.
I think so.
You're gonna plant all these flowers? No, I'm just kidding.
You're gonna plant some flowers?
Uh-huh.
I'll never make it look as good as that, I'm sure.
I think that's gonna look great with the.
It's going to be beautiful.
I think it is.
That is great. You know why I say that. I have one.
You have it like that?
Did you get approval?
Yes, and it got approved, yes. Yes,
Well, you had to ask for a variance, correct? 'Cause your
I did,
fence was
because
taller.
my fence was 4 feet high as opposed to 3, and I needed the pickets closer together,
Yeah,
and it got approved. BZA though, not here.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Is there any other changes you plan on making, or you plan on maybe painting it the same color it already is?
To the main house. So we've already begun renovation on the carriage house, which sits in the back. So we have totally all new floors, new paint on the walls, all new appliances. It's coming close to rental ready. I know I've got some applications I need to do for that as well here, so we'll be coming up with that. I will then begin work on what we're calling the main house. And I'll be honest, we haven't decided yet if we're going to maintain it as the 2 apartments that it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Or try to maybe restore it back to a single family. we're looking at both options for that right now.
That would be nice. There are a lot of people looking for something bigger than a
Is that
one
right?
or two bedroom apartment.
Well, I'd
In
be
Hampstead.
happy to hear more about that if anybody has input, because, you know, when I look around Main Street at my neighbors, all I see is, you know, I call it multifamily, but it's mostly rental. And that kind of discouraged us a little bit from looking forward to making restoring it back to its,
Right.
maybe it's, we really fell in love with the property because it's got a lot of the original character inside the home. So that kind of gave us thought about renovating it as that.
And we have, the past few years, and Jim, I don't know if you know how many, I know of at least one of people that, well, no, more than one of people have purchased single-family homes on Main Street to live in, not to have as apartments.
Oh. Well, it's, like I said, my contractor's just wrapping up with the other part. We're about to get ready to do the assessment for renovation cost for the main home, and I'll need to decide pretty quickly at that point for that.
Or
So,
Mr. Cannon.
you and your lovely wife could live in it.
well, that's, we're certainly thinking about saving off one of the units for us, either one or the other. Maybe making a second home here.
No.
We're spending so much time here.
The only reason I ask about future renovations is, as you know, if it changes the color on the outside or things changes, you just have to
Yeah.
come back to see us.
So on the exterior side, we're not planning to change any of the siding that's there. We will be doing, all of the fascia trim is rotted and needs to be replaced. So I suppose I'll come back at that point.
If it's kind for kind,
It's kind for kind.
you don't have to. But if you're changing whether, for example, if you want to change the front porch to be more open, or if you're changing it in any way, then you need to come back. But
We
if
are gonna
it's-
change the front porch, put in a different column set,
Mhm.
make it a little bit more, I think, traditional than what's there now. And to replace or cover the concrete porch with a wood.
If you plan on painting the exterior also, we have a bucket of paint program, that if you do paint the exterior of your house on Main Street, and you provide the town with the receipts from any materials, we will provide you up to $250 back. So that's something to keep in mind. I will send you over a rental housing license application, and I'll also send you over a bucket of paint, all the information about that, so that way you have that too.
Excellent, thank you, Jim.
Any questions? No questions? Any further comment? Then we need a motion, if you're all in agreement, to approve the new fencing at 1006 South Main Street. And this is picket fencing, vinyl fencing. May we have a motion, please?
Make a motion to approve the new vinyl and picket fencing at 1006 South Main Street.
In a second?
I second it.
Any further comments? And so approved. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, reintroduction of the final site plan, Melanie Acres 3.
Good evening. I'm Dan Stanley with DRS and Associates. And what I brought with me tonight was a copy of the plan that we approved back in 2018. And of course, you had plans that we submitted earlier this week. The only real change from this plan to what you now have is we actually revised the stormwater comments. And the only real change is right down in this corner here, here's parcel A that contains an underground stormwater trench. And what drove that was, they made us provide 10-year storage. And between the dry wells and the wide shoulders and the swales down the property line here, we couldn't get enough volume of storage, so we put a trench down here that would collect the water off the driveway and off the one of the houses here, and then of course you get the pipe with a small pipe, gets piped down into this new inlet, and gets tied into the storm drain system. Other than that, same plan, same landscaping, same swale, so. So if you have the full-size plans, and now I know we have comments from the town, and probably another 3 or 4 or 5 agencies from the town that we need to buy, so when we get that done, see if I can get their comments, and be back to see you again next year.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, I do. So Jim provided the minutes from the last time you guys came in front of the commission. That wasn't on there at the time, and it said it got held up because of, something with the storm drain system, had to do with an infiltrated berm system and dry wells. So is this mitigation the one that's approved completely by the Department of?
Well, what had happened was, in front of this commission, we got preliminary plan approval, and we didn't have preliminary plan approval for stormwater. So that's what's happened between then and now. We now have that approval in place, and.
For the original plan that you had back in 2018,
I'm saying
2019?
Yeah, the only thing we've added to the original plan that got approved in 2018 is this parcel A here that has a underground trench in it. And we did that to get through stormwater
Okay,
approval.
gotcha. All right.
So we have a fairly short letter from stormwater, some things that we got crossed our T's, dotted our I's on those plans there. And then, again, the town comments, and we got some comments from your utilities for the sewer, and probably a few more that I'm not thinking of right now, but.
Okay.
So when we get those addressed, hopefully we come back with approval letters from the agencies, and then maybe we can all move forward from there.
Well, the other difference is you've added the dry wells. The dry wells were not on there in
Well,
2018.
they were.
They were, okay.
They were, now, we added more dry wells, okay, but there were dry wells on there.
Okay.
And again, this was all driven, I don't know if you understand stormwater or not, but we have recharge, water quality, channel protection, overbank, and Q10. And we asked early in the thing to get a waiver for the Q10. They didn't give it to us, and that's what drove the trench and some of these other dry wells.
And everyone up here has a copy of the comments that we sent to DRS in May. So you'll know that when you look at the plan, the things that we noticed that we think need.
Would you like me to read this plan for you?
That's 2018, we have a copy of it here.
All right.
So basically, the comments, a lot of these are details. I mean, most of them are simple details of listing the school district. Most of our comments were details. Something that was important is the setbacks weren't on the plan to show, like we have the housing envelope, there's not setbacks to show.
It should be on the, it depends which plan you look at in the construction plans, but,
Did I not look at all 3 plans, Jim?
if you look on the final grading plan,
Page,
I don't see the setback lines.
yeah, I didn't see the setbacks.
You might have them here. Even if I don't see one in the construction plan, they would be on the record plat. But yeah, we'll be glad to have those. No problem.
And the one thing, Dan, as you separated homeowners and the town, this page just needs to be clarified, because it appears when you say, the town of Hampstead public facility, it appears we're taking the swale, the trench, which,
We're not doing, we know we're not doing it.
yeah,
it's
so we just need to clarify.
It's just parcel A with that underground.
So it just needs to make sure you clarify it on there.
Okay, we'll try to do a better job.
I think it was. And there was one comment that, it might necessarily be addressed in a email, but number 11, there was concerns about the level of that. I think this was supposed to be,
No.
that's a different number, but it should have been like,
Typo in the plans.
Yeah.
Okay.
but no, this is us, was a typo, but they were concerned about, lot 23. that the water elevation, because of the grading, there might be concern with, let me go back to
Yeah,
that.
that's
Yeah,
where that-
with the
that new-
basement.
Well, we show what tenure levels there at that new end. So, again, I don't think that's a concern.
And are you gonna have an HOA? You had talked about an HOA. Is it big enough for an HOA?
I mean, that's gonna be up to the board, but my recommendation would be, I live on a use and common driveway. And one of the historical problems in the county with use and common driveways are that there's notes put in the record plat that tells you there's a declaration of maintenance obligation. And historically, the ones that's been used in the county have been drawn up by the county. And now, in the last 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, the developer's attorney has to draw them up and get them recorded in the county. And the problem historically has been, you have, let's say this one, we got, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 users on it. And there's gonna come a time when that driveway's gonna need to be repaid. So you get 3 people that, you know, maybe it's not really bad, but they like driving on a nice looking driveway, so they wanna pave it, and the other 2 don't have the money. Then they start fighting about it. The driveway that I live on, we have an HOA, and we pay a fee of $75 a month, and that takes care of plowing the snow, the garbage collection, cutting some open space grass, and then when it comes time to repave the driveway, right now, they've got between their money account and their checking account, they've got like $15,000 in it. So by the time we get to the point where that driveway is gonna need to be repaved, we're probably gonna have over $20,000 there. And then the majority says, let's repave it, and they do it because the money's there, they don't have to fight about it. So, you know, we've done it on, we've got 2 jobs right now that are just complete that we've done it on. And of course, all these use and commons now, because of where stormwater is right now, there's always stormwater facilities that support the driveway. So it's not just paving the driveway, but
Right,
it's
it's
also
the trench.
it's also supporting or maintaining those facilities also. So in that document, there's language as far as, you know, who gets to use it, how the maintenance is gonna be shared. And then it tells them, because when we build this driveway and do the stormwater facilities, we have to as-built them and turn them into the county. So we're now putting in that document, telling them where they can go find those as-built drawings, because the other thing the county's making us do right now is on these plans going in, they make us put not just construction schedules and construction inspection schedules, but they put maintenance schedules and maintenance and inspection schedules on there. So so we put in the document where they can find that information. They go there, get a copy of the plan, and then someone from the plans will know what they gotta do and how frequently they gotta do it. Because what's coming up right now is these private facilities, the county's not inspecting you. They used to do an annual inspection, and every 3 years, triennial, you have to report to the state. What they're doing now is if it's a private facility, the homeowner's gonna have to hire someone like myself to do an annual inspection, and then every 3 years, we have to turn in an inspection report.
When did that change?
In 6 months.
I was gonna say,
Now,
we just,
now, they will inspect the dry wells.
They'll inspect the dry
But the wide
well.
shoulder, or if that was our trench, the homeowners would have to do that. Like you go on a commercial site, industrial site, those people are gonna have to hire someone that's, you know, familiar with this information and do these annual and triennial and then every 3 years turn the report in. So it's just getting more and more expensive as we move forward, so. So again, we're trying to put, because one of the questions that came back to us is, well, how do these people know what to do, when to do, and how to do it? So we came back and said, let's put it in the MO.
You know, if I might comment, in the future, as a resale, a problem that usually crops up in a resale of a property where there's a use in common driveway, there's always a question as, who owns what do I maintain, what am I responsible for? And then when the new buyer of that property, not the original, but the new buyer, comes in, let's say in 5 or 10 years, and their lender will question, and their appraiser, who owns that driveway, you know, the egress and ingress. So what portion do they own? What are they responsible for? This always comes up in a real estate transaction where there's a use in common driveway.
Well, that's good, because
Yeah.
my experience has been, it doesn't come up, and then when something has to be maintained or something breaks, it's like no one knows what to do or how to do it. So I'd say if you're experienced that's getting discussed at the settlement table, that's probably a good thing.
It's
not a bad
discussed before the settlement table. By the time we get to settlement, it's too late.
Well, here's something else on this
Yeah.
particular job here. 2 of these lots, we had to get through stormwater. We had porous pavings for the driveway that comes off the Houston Common. And stormwater factor said, okay, how's anyone gonna know, again, what to do or when to do and how to do it and all that? So we replied back to them with our last letter, said, well, when you do the as-built, we gotta, again, we'd have to turn in, if that's what happens on that lot when the house gets built, we gotta turn in as-built for them to get their use and occupancy permit. We said, county, you take the as-built plans and attach it to the tax bill and send it, you know it's going to the property owner, the guy that's gotta pay the tax bill. Because if they don't maintain it, the county can come in and maintain it for them and add it to the tax bill. So.
The county or the town?
Well,
Because
this-
it's in town.
Well, again, the county's one that's inspecting the driveways.
So they'll inspect this as also.
Well, again, this is probably gotta be done privately, this one and this
Okay.
privately. But again, so we suggest to them that they send out, we go out every year, and you know you're going to the property owner, whether it's a rental property or not, you're getting to the person that's gotta pay the tax bill and is responsible for it. And they haven't said, yes, we're gonna try that, they just said they're doing some internal investigation, see how that would actually work in the county, because it would have to come from upstairs down to the tax office when you send the tax bill out, so. But again, it seems like we're in this time period right now where, you know, we've done all the theoretical formulas and everything, and we've done the design, we've built them, now we're in the part where we're trying to educate the public how to maintain these things so they'll carry on in the future. So, this is good test for the county, see what they come up with those 2 lots. But it may be, when these lots get built, maybe that person doesn't want porous paving, they do something totally different, which is possible.
But if they do something totally different, did you have all your stormwater credits that you need?
Well, they'll have to do something to take care of the volume that these driveways take care of. It could be a bioretention, or it could be.
Oh, the developer,
Right,
not the.
yeah,
right.
the builder, you know, so
Yeah.
it could totally change. They wanted us to put the stuff on a record plat, and I objected to that. I said, I don't think that's the proper place, because if someone wanted to change, now they, besides doing the redesign there, you also gotta do an amended record plat, to take one off, put the other one on. It just seems like they're clogging land records up with a lot of worthless paper, so we objected to that and suggested the thing with tying it to the tax bill, and like I said, they're entertaining that idea right now.
And I can't recall, it's been so long, Dan. The trench instead of stormwater inlets. Why was it decided to have the trench instead of the stormwater inlets to go into
The trench, here again, okay, so we got this driveway. As you drive up the driveway, it's being tilted from right to left. So the water shoots across the driveway, and then there's a wide shoulder here that treats the water off the driveway. Stormwater regs said, you can't have any more than 2 times the width of that driveway of green water that drains onto the driveway. So what the trench does, it intercepts all, because you've got, you know, pretty big drainage area here, you know? So it intercepts that water, drains down the trench, there's an under drain down here that puts it back into the manhole that drains it down here. So what it does is takes the green water that it doesn't get to the driveway, because we had too much green water. Here's something, just a fact that you people ought to be aware of. Today's stormwater regulations, if you have an acre of grass, you have to store 182 cubic feet of water somehow for the ESD volume, which you always have to do. If you have to do 10-year management, you have to store 782 cubic feet for grass. And that's because the state wants us to take all our land uses and get it back as if it were woods. So, again, we think it's crazy, but it's the rules. So,
The rules are the rules, right?
I'm telling you, sometimes hard to comply with, but we're doing the best we can, so. That's it.
Any comments?
Hope we see-
Any sort of timeline on when you may have a plan ready to resubmit?
Well, I mean, we're probably gonna be 30 days getting back into the county, they're gonna be 30 days getting the comments back to us. Now, if they come back as approved, we're ready to come back to them. If they're not, I want to address those comments and get approval letters before we come back and visit you folks.
So in other words, to resubmit based on our comments would be near the end of your line?
Well, when we submit to the county, we'll submit back to the town. We're gonna take care of everyone's comments this
Perfect.
next time. So
Right.
when we submit back, it'll be to all agencies.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that since we have new people on the commission since this was last year. Does anybody have any questions? And you're more than welcome to call us.
Okay, next on the agenda, recommendation for council for adoption of ordinance number 544, an ordinance to amend chapter 135, article 5 regarding the historic district. Have you all read this?
So this is what we talked about
Okay.
after the last meeting, correct?
Yeah, it was my first question. I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's what prompted
Yeah.
the change.
Yeah.
Is that
There's a
right?
couple bullets that I noticed in there. And this doesn't mean that, so basically the historical district is not just Main Street. The historical district can be anything
It's a zoning,
in town. that
so
this
something
group
that's
decides
zoned historic.
We can, that someone wants to put up that says, so it doesn't have to necessarily be on Main Street, it could be anywhere. We can-
No, like the mill. The mill is zoned historic.
Right.
Right, and former North Carroll High School was
Zoned historic.
rezoned
Was
historic
rezoned that,
over the
yeah.
last.
Partly, yeah,
year and a half.
historic and general business.
Right,
Which
okay.
historic is becoming increasingly questionable.
But yeah, I
Well,
mean,
we use the title historic as it's described as, I forget the term, it's
Preserve the
important to
building.
the history of Hampstead. So that's why we were able to zone the North Carroll High School historic. So there's different levels of historic. Like you have historic properties that are designated historic through the Historical Society. And of course, North Carroll High School is not one of them. So our zoning is more general. Our zoning is, this is historic to the town of Hampstead. It has a history with the town of Hampstead. And I can't remember, I don't think you have the beginning of the historic.
If you, I don't have the code with me, but if
Yeah.
you go into the code and you go into historic district, the text, and the first thing there is the purpose of the historic district, and there's 4 or 5 bullet points, and it seemed like when we were looking what to do with the old North Carroll High School property, it hit on all those bullet points to fit right with the reasoning for the
Because
historic
when you look
zone.
at a piece of property and you look at uses, you know, talking to the lawyer, talking about maybe creating a new zone, that didn't seem appropriate. General business wasn't really appropriate, neither was local business. But historic, in the sense of purpose of the general, no, I didn't know if you were pulling up that, but
No.
historic as a general purpose, not as a historically designated property, if that makes sense. It's a
Different.
more, it's a zoning term, not, and I'm sure Cheryl, where am I? Sharon is familiar with, sometimes when someone renovates a property that is documented and designated as historic with the state of Maryland, sometimes it's like you have to put in the same windows, you have to
Right.
do, you know,
If it's
There's-
designated as a historic property, you must, if you're going to renovate it or change it, it has to be within the designated rules and regulations of a, quote, Maryland historical. It actually gets registered.
Right,
It's not
right,
like-
registered.
You
That's
don't
what
make
I'm
it
looking
up
for.
like it's a
Yeah.
dream. It does have to be approved and registered.
and that is different.
That's different than what
That's-
we're talking
Now, those
about.
properties probably fall in within
We
our
might have
historic
some.
zoning, but this historic is a zoning. It's a zoning.
For example, the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties, they have what's called the Hampstead Downtown District. And within that district, I think there are at least 60 individual properties on Main Street or within the downtown area that are on the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties, 60, 70 properties.
Wow.
Our historic zoning district, properties that are zoned historic within the town code, 6 or 7. So,
Am I hearing? Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, I was just, whenever I read, I guess it's clause E under 135-42, indoor climate controlled self-storage facilities.
Yeah,
Seems
that's-
very, very specific, right? So,
Well, when you look at changing the code, you have to look at how many properties could it affect.
right,
So you want to look at, sometimes when you amend it, you have things that are more specific, like across the street. we put a certain square footage in that, because it's an industrial building across the street that the church is in.
But
With the
it's
church,
usually
this is a
prompted
case-
by somebody who's coming in petitioning for a change, right?
Well, the
So who's
town can
petitioning for
petition,
this change?
the town can petition for a
Okay.
change. So, but when you're wording it, you want to be very, very careful, because you don't want self-storage in houses on Main Street. So that's why we chose to put a size in here, because it could be beneficial in certain areas of town, but it's, in other areas of town, we don't want.
But this
That's
was o-
understandable.
This was only added though to facilitate putting a storage facility in the high school. To
Well,
maintain
we
the
are
cost
not
of the high
allowed to
school.
change the code for one building.
Okay.
So that,
But
but
ultimately,
we
that's
can
why-
change ultimately, like, where would this type of use be best served, and we can look at that, the different areas it can be best served.
But look at the square footage of that building, 100,000 with an area, above grade area greater than 100,000 square feet. That's a pretty big building.
It's a pretty big building.
So it's
because
not gonna be a
again,
house on Main Street. It's
that
not-
was the point. We
that's
don't
the
want it to
point.
be a house on Main
Right.
Street. Yeah,
So
we
that's
don't
the
want it to
point
be
to
a house on
protect
Main
that.
Street.
Because I would not want to see that, period. Okay.
So again, when the town's allowed to petition to change the code for uses we think are beneficial, because sometimes we have different businesses that'll come into town and we'll see a certain use can deter growth or deter businesses from coming in. So that's why we look at zoning, and this is zoning code, of how could we adjust our zoning to help accommodate more growth, or look at different uses, or help vacant buildings become more useful or become filled. So that's why we look at it to make an amendment of, we might see a constant change, or a constant deterrent is the word I want to look at. We've had businesses come in and say, well, I'd like to buy that building, but this, or, you know, we'd like to move here, but because of this, we can't. So that's why we look at our code and say, well, we should amend this, because we're not going in the direction that we would like to go. And this is our guide. And we want to be careful. You can't be too specific, but at the same time, you want to be able to guide growth, commercial, residential, and our zoning code is our guide.
Yeah, so maybe it just doesn't sit well with me, and maybe I just need to understand it. I see you have the same discomfort, right? It's like, okay. Yeah, I know where this is coming from, and I understand the, encouraging the growth part, but it just doesn't feel like, because of the discussion we had at the end of the last meeting, that it wasn't an open discussion, that this was what was being
It didn't
asked
seem-
for, and then, we see this change in the zoning, which is directly correlated to that meeting that we had. That was not an open meeting. It's just what doesn't sit well with me.
Well, and again, there's different uses for different buildings.
Right.
And in some cases, if
I hear it.
we limit the uses for a building, then how do I say this? If you have a building that's not being used, whether it could be the mill, it could be many different places, and you limit the uses that are allowed, then it comes to the point that someone's like, well, you know what, I can't afford to keep this building anymore.
So as unpleasant as it is, the town sees the need to open up options in order to sustain the existence of the building,
Of different buildings, yes.
which,
Because you can look at
example-
uses,
Like she said, the example of the old industrial
Right.
factory across the street.
because we looked at the different buildings, that was an industrial building. It's restricted industrial.
Sewing factory, wasn't it?
Sewing factory, Josie Bank storage, I think even
Right.
Walmart used it for storage.
Yeah.
However, the community grew around it.
a church is different than self-storage though.
Well, I think the way I'm reading this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is just simply stating that anybody that's wanting to do this now has to come in front of this board for approval. We're not approving
Right.
a 100,000 square foot self-storage indoor climate controlled facility.
No, 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 no,
We're,
no.
we're calling out that anybody that wants to do this in an existing structure, that's, obviously this is the historical, that's deemed historical, has to come to us for approval before they are allowed to do anything that has to do with
Right.
indoor climate controlled self-storage facilities. Yes, it's specific, but I think my guess is that these were all added at some point when the police department wanted to enter that building, you know,
Right.
and that was probably not always, I don't know what the history of that building was, but that was probably not always a police department, and it was probably zoned residential, but now it's whatever a police department is zoned is,
I
not,
think
you
the
know,
sticking point
it needed approval.
a little bit is just the character of the other things in the list
Yeah.
as being appropriate uses, so, but it goes back to that in order to preserve the facility that's there now, there has to be somebody who's willing to financially invest in it, and this opens up the options, but it is very in character different than what we were.
Yeah,
But if you
so you're
read-
accommodating the growth
Right.
in a very specific way so
Yes.
that it doesn't get out of hand.
And if
And
you
that's-
read, I'm
know.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
If you read 135-42, conditional uses requiring board authorization.
Right.
So you're not writing a blank check to anybody.
No, you have to
It
go
has to
before.
be authorized, it has to fulfill a certain condition or standard of size and location. And I totally agree with you. You know, when you have facilities such as the high school, which is vacant for all these years, deteriorating for all these years, eventually when somebody is willing to invest in it, then in order for them to be successful in their investment and continue the growth, we have to have an open mind and be able to examine, is it right or is it not? And will it fall within these guidelines?
But
And-
if you look at the uses, the things they have in common is most of them is like lower traffic.
Right.
And I can personally say that we have had people that were looking for indoor storage. There's a market need for indoor climate controlled storage in the town of Hampstead. There is. But when you look at it's not going to change the exterior of the building because that's already written that we don't want the exterior of the building to change, except for the sign. You would have a sign.
Right.
But
Is that in fact the case? The exterior is not going to change?
oh no, the exterior is not, and that's if you. And everything wasn't printed off, but
If you look at the historic
Right.
entire chapter, they cannot make any exterior changes without the approval of this commission.
Right.
Now, one thing I will point out, if you read this, it says conditional uses requiring board authorization. And that will not come back to the commission. If someone wants to do the indoor self-storage, that needs the approval of the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Right,
So it
BZA.
would go to BZA, it would not come back to
Right.
planning and zoning.
Thank you for clarifying that. You're right. Yes, I agree.
Jim, I'm looking at this. Do we?
So why are we only limiting buildings over 100,000 square feet? Do we really want indoor climate-controlled self-storage in any historical building without them going to the?
We don't want it
What is
anywhere.
that?
Like if somebody comes
I
in,
don't
this
think
is
it's gonna come up
yeah,
with
it's
this.
areas
Well, but
greater.
I'm just
so
saying,
so
but
if a
it-
house on Main Street, they can't have it. This doesn't allow a house on Main Street to have
But
it.
nobody's gonna.
Yeah, we don't know. We always had
That's
somebody.
what I'm saying,
enough.
We've already had it happen. So, but as I read this, Jim, I'm wondering if we should say something like, but not to be more than a certain percentage of the building.
And you really,
I mean, I know we're being specific, which we might have to ask Michelle, but at this point in time, this doesn't limit the amount of the building that could be, it tells you what size building, but it doesn't limit how much of the building can be self-storage.
Oh, but that's a good point. Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, that question came up before when we were discussing adding it, and I cannot remember the reason why it was not put in. It is something that we can look at, and if it needs to be adjusted, then we can make the adjustment and come back, I guess, next month. Or if we came up with it now, I guess we could amend it. No, we couldn't do that.
Well, planning and zoning's making a recommendation, so they can include if it's possible to put a percentage in there. Because I know you can't be too specific, but we have, like solar, we have a percentage in there.
is there any, maybe you guys have already vetted this, is there any legal ramifications to being this specific, to limiting?
No, well, we ran it past the attorney. Yes.
But the recommendation would be to limit the size of the facility.
Well, no, we say we
limiting?
wouldn't want, it already says that you have to be greater
Greater
than,
than, right?
100,000. What we don't have in there is a percentage. Again, the market drives what they're gonna put
Percentage
in,
of the,
but,
yes, percentage of
the
the actual full,
Space available.
whole
Right,
building.
right.
Like, the building itself has to be greater than 100,000 square feet.
You can't cover
And then
more
I
than
think we wanna go
10%,
back and say, okay, X,
20%.
no more than,
right,
So if the building qualifies by its size of 100,000 square feet or
Right.
greater, but the indoor storage facility would then have to be limited to what?
I don't know.
X percentage.
Yeah, a certain
of
percentage
the
of.
size of the building.
But you don't know what that is.
That's what we were.
My
Well-
guess is it's gotta be pretty easy to figure out, cause the
Yeah.
way the building's.
But we
carved
could
and the
decide
uses
how much
already.
of a building would we want. Maybe we only want 20%. Like I said, again, the market will drive how much self-storage they're gonna, climate-controlled self-storage they're going to do. But if we wanna say we don't want the possibility in the future to have 100,000 square foot building that's all climate-controlled self-storage in a historic district, we can, but we have to run it past Michelle that maybe only 20% or something like that. We could put a percentage can be self-storage of the full building.
But the whole point of adding this
The-
now is to keep those other portions of the high school viable for the community, right? So isn't that in itself gonna limit what's available for self-storage
Well,
buildings?
this applies to every
Oh, I
historic.
I
I know,
get
but
it.
that's a
That's-
point. It's like, you just never know what's gonna happen, or if somebody rezones to historic in the future, we wanna see how does that apply?
I understand it's blank, but it's a very specific blanket
Right,
zone
right.
too. It's-
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I would like to see a percentage. Because I don't wanna see it as 100%. I mean, then
Right.
again, it's BZA's decision at that point, but
No, it makes absolute sense.
I think if we put something in there, you're kinda limiting it
And I'm sorry for the
down.
last minute thing. I wasn't thinking about that before as I was looking at this, but it's,
Like I said, I remember it came up and I cannot remember the reason why it didn't go in.
So what would happen, say, we're kind of tying this to a specific property, but with the new industrial park that's being built and everything else, another company comes in, wants to build a self-storage, climate-controlled thing.
it's not
And then-
allowed
It's
in that zoning.
industrial district, not historic.
Yeah, it's
It
not
has to
allowed.
be in historic.
And an
Got
existing
it,
structure.
okay, yep.
This
Okay.
applies to this zone,
Okay.
not to that.
Okay, so where I was going with that would
Yeah.
be, if they build a building, but you tell them they can only use 20% of
See?
their.
Right.
That's guarding
Right.
historic district, that's what
And
you
that's
gotta
where
remember.
Tammy was
Yeah.
going with
Yeah.
the, somebody has something on Main Street and they're like, oh, you know what? I'm not gonna keep this as apartments anymore. I'm gonna make it an indoor.
Well, we-
I
100%
was
can't
saying
do
something
that.
from
We
Wednesday.
don't wanna do
Right.
that.
But
Right.
it's, this applies only to that,
Right.
yep.
Yeah, but I guess for me, it's like, it was not to keep debating this too much, but, so let's just take the North Carroll, if somebody decided to convert that entire thing to indoor storage, but it was all contained within the existing structure, the facade and the outside stays the same, then what's the harm? What are you protecting against by saying a percentage of it?
Other community use.
The
Other
building's
community
being
use.
preserved because of its tie to
Right.
the community, and that's the only reason, but without the business going in to provide some financial support, that building can't be there for the rec programs, for the auditorium, for
But if
the
you look,
schools,
right.
the.
They have to
Look
make,
at
it-
any-
But you're not being specific about, well, you want to preserve the gymnasium, you want to preserve these, the art.
But when it comes to zoning, so
Right.
we look at just zoning,
That's
right?
different, right?
The whole, don't look
Right.
at a specific property, just this applies to every property that's historic. So it's one of those that, what do you want to see? And this is like I said, it's the town's guide. What do we want to see? We've had a need for indoor climate controlled self-storage facilities. It keeps coming up constantly. It's come up with many bit different zoning, but it appears that existing buildings are something that's easily converted into self-storage climate control. So if you're looking at the historic district, it's a type of business that the town said, okay, that would accommodate other things that are in there. And what do we want to see? We have an existing building. We've said we don't want it on Main Street because we're looking at the whole town. We want it to be more than 100,000 square feet. then maybe we look at a certain percentage of the building. And as it's written, then it would go back to the Board of Zoning Appeals to approve it. Of course, after, whether you recommend it, if you recommend it to council, of course, council's the one who approves it, but it's a generalization of what do you want to see this town? Because you have, just like when people complained about the Dollar General, you have what you want to see. Everybody'd like to see it look like Ellicott City, and we're never going to look like that. You know what I mean? But then you have needs. People have needs within the community, and this is a need that has continually popped up. So it's a combination of a lot of different things.
Oh, and again, if you go back to Dollar General, you know, you people, I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want
Right.
it. Do you want to see a burnt out building with construction tape
Right,
around
right.
it for the rest of our lives? So it's like the lesser of two evils. But if you talk about something like the mill, for example, which is historic,
It is historic.
correct? Would we want to see 100% of that converted into indoor climate storage? Probably not. So
No.
if I think personally, if we look at that percentage to find out why it was left out or if it can be put in,
Right.
it kind of solves two purposes for
Right.
keeping what we like to see in the town versus what we need. It's kind of like
So a
doing both.
compromise, just a
A little
compromise.
bit of a
Right.
compromise.
Right, and compromise is good, as long as everyone can agree
Right, right,
to the
right.
compromise, which would be a good thing.
Question, because I just pulled this up.
Perfect.
There's a list of the conditional uses, which is what's on the proposal
Mm-hmm.
here, and then adding the specifics of the 100,000 square feet,
Right.
potentially the percentage. But then there's this, down here, there's required conditions. And this is all under,
Right.
this is all under the historic district, zoning district information, and it gives you the details of what accessory uses are, required conditions, and I think the required would those specifics be, would that be better fitting under the required conditions versus in the initial list of what type of property? Because if you look, it's, you know, commercial amusements located in a building with no specifics. It's not saying commercial amusements located in a building that includes a roller coaster, a mini golf course, and a bouncy house. It's just saying commercial amusements located in a building. And now, looking at the way I would think this would flow, I would then go into required conditions, and the required conditions would say this type of building has to meet within these parameters under required conditions, instead of having it in the
Conditional uses.
the conditional uses requiring board authorization, which that would simply just say,
But this is a use. So that's what you have required conditions.
which is, you know, a lot of
Yeah, next time
adaptive
we should-
reuse prior to the issuance of a zoning.
That's kind of like conditions that need to be met.
Yes, which I would say
Yeah,
that's
this-
100,000 square feet.
And this is a
That's
use because
stuff
any
like
any
that, right?
conditional uses require the Board of Zoning Appeals approval. So
But then,
it's a conditional use.
Mm-hmm.
so you could say above grade area greater than 100,000 square feet, meaning that the building must be at least that.
Right.
But that blank percent of that building shall be used for
Right.
the self-storage facility. So you could say 20% of the building, not more than 20%. I'm just picking a number.
Right, and we can, again, we'll talk to our attorney to see how to word it, because we do it in industrial. Industrial, we talk about a certain percentage can be, or a certain square footage can be an accessory use. Like, they might have a small retail shop as part of the manufacturing, a restaurant as part of the manufacturing, but we have an accessory use.
Because
But-
there's this one, adaptive reuse of an historic building may require submission and approval of a site plan. That's pretty broad.
But if you go to, well, it's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
But if you go to the very beginning to address Barb's question about historic, it talks about, let's see,
That wasn't really a question, by the
Oh.
way. It was more
Oh.
commentary, but.
but the reason we look at different things as historic, again, not designated historic, but it just says safeguard the heritage of Hampstead, as we see the heritage of
To
Hampstead.
preserve that building. for the
Yeah,
history
and
of
then-
Hampstead. Yeah.
Stabilize and improve property values, I can see that being a big one.
And,
Foster civic pride.
Down
and
there.
our local sense of,
Strengthen the economy of the town is the next one, so that,
Yeah.
that all fits, yeah.
Up.
That's pretty broad.
Just guide me here, Jim.
So it sounds like to me we're gonna wait to,
Well,
what are you gonna do?
have we introduced it? We've introduced it to the council, right?
Correct. It's
So,
introduced, the next step, it comes to you guys review it, and, if you like it as is, it goes back with your recommendation to approve. If you would like to amend, then we would need to amend and hold off a month, which is, needs to be done.
well, they can recommend it with an amendment,
Correct.
because
if-
then the council could approve it with an amendment,
Correct.
so, but you
Wouldn't
could,
we want to see the amendment though before recommending it?
Government,
well, you would you would like to see a percentage,
town code.
but,
But
so
we,
we can do either way.
but we wouldn't know what that percentage
Right.
is until
So
more
we could
research
come
is
back.
done, so
Right.
it would be probably better to review it.
And that's why I said it would
Yeah.
probably be a month.
Yeah, you'd have to come back.
So we'll put this off then, is what I'm hearing you say, yes, Jim?
That's up to you all. If you would like to add a percentage, and we're not sure exactly what percentage, then I
Oh,
would
okay.
suggest that we do some research and we revisit next month.
And like we said, we do have to run it past the attorney, because you can't be too specific.
Yeah, and that's where I think like,
can't
that
be
would be
too
my
narrow.
ask, is just to record, is some of that stuff better under the required conditions clause versus in the special use cases, just because that, for me, and I'm not an attorney by any means.
None of us sitting here are we? No.
That's why we have one.
I'm not
That's
one.
where it would just make sense to me, but
Right.
again, making sense and legal is two different things, so.
But when you look at process, you're looking at processes. So let's say, for example, someone comes in and they're saying, this is what we want to do. You would look at, is it a permitted use? And you go, oh, it isn't. It's a conditional use that has to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals. So this is something that has to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Well-
And then it would come back to, they do,
Yeah, I could see that with the square footage. I don't know, maybe
Right.
the percentages, maybe, now, because we added the percentage idea in there, maybe that would be under required conditions, where that would be a requirement.
but
The
it would
building-
only apply to this use.
Potentially.
That was our recommendation, to only apply to this use. Because
And
the other uses, if it's, let's say, we have a building like this and somebody wants to fill it up with radio and television production facilities, we're not gonna necessarily say no. We were just limiting the amount, or we might be able to limit the amount that the self-storage facilities
Yeah.
take of the building.
That makes, I see. Yeah, this is, okay, I see now, yeah, because required conditions are all historic
Right,
buildings.
everything.
Gotcha, okay.
And next time, if we did, we'll print out the entire chapter, because it does get a little confusing, only having a portion. And that way you can see it as a whole.
And like in a case like this, if, once we do get it hammered out, what exactly we want to see in the ordinance and what we want to see listed as a conditional use, it would go to Board of Zoning Appeals, and if they did approve it, the indoor storage use, then what would happen next is there would be a site plan, and as Charlie pointed out, under required conditions, that site plan would then come here for you guys to approve.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, in my mind, we're not debating, I just lost it, the other two bullets that were being proposed, correct?
I didn't hear anybody debate it. No one disagreed.
It's mostly just where'd it go?
It's really clause E of 135
Yeah,
40.
I don't have any issues with P or F, I think that,
And
makes
P's in it,
sense,
in pretty much every zoning district, we realize it's not in this one.
So we
So
could
is that-
recommend that this ordinance to amend Chapter 135, Article 5, regarding the historic district, that we would recommend that it go, approve it to go back to council with a recommendation to amend the amount of square footage for, or percentage of building for storage facility, indoor storage facilities.
But I think you said you wanted to see what that percentage number is.
yeah, I was
We don't
thinking-
know that.
Right, so we would have to, we'd have to wait and come
Well, why don't we
back.
just
Yeah,
wait
I
and
was
let it
thinking-
come
Yeah,
back?
just make it
Why don't we
forward,
do
right?
that then? Instead of rushing to approve something
Right.
and
Yeah.
schlock it up with this other language or that other language, why don't it just wait get the answers and then bring it back.
Okay.
Then we can clean it up and be comfortable with it, then forcing it.
Do we
Does
have-
that make sense?
Do we have to make a motion to defer, or do we
Table
just
it.
say? No.
Table it.
Yeah.
Do we need,
Just need a motion to table the
I need a
recommendation.
motion then to table the decision on the ordinance to amend Chapter 135, Article 5 regarding the Historic District. All those in favor?
Aye.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
So approved. To wait. Thank you. Okay. Carroll County Department of Planning update.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're so welcome.
All right. Just a couple quick updates from over the County Planning Department for the comprehensive rezoning for the ag and conservation zoning districts, county zoning districts. 2 public hearings were held by the Board of County Commissioners on September 22nd, and they will also discuss again on October 6th. Information for the county rezoning can be pulled up at carrollrezoning.org. Also, as Jim and Tammy, you were there, the Carroll County pre-tour was held on September 19th. This was for county and municipal staff. There will be the tour, and the pre-tour was in anticipation of the tour when the Secretary of Transportation comes. They come through each county and listen to what are the different counties' priorities for transportation. The pre-tour was where staff got to sort of prep the state of what they may see when elected officials are at the tour with the Secretary. The tour for electeds the tour date is October 13th at 2 p.m. and it is virtual. Also, Tammy and Jim, I sent you the link in case anyone is interested for the draft 2023 to 2028 Consolidated Transportation Program. Also, the Carroll County Transportation Master Plan will be heard by the Carroll County Planning and Zoning Commission on October 5th. And the Hazard Mitigation Plan is going to the state and federal government in mid-October for review.
Can I have a quick question about the
Yes.
master plan? So they put Manchester and Hampstead together, but everything's for what's happening in Manchester. They have our Main Street revitalization project on there, which is, we have the deeds, it's completed. So it's not really for a future comprehensive plan because it's done.
Right.
But we discussed the only road we were looking at now, it's on our comprehensive plan for Doss Garland. It's not something that would go on the county plan?
Doss Garland is currently in the county.
Correct. It's in the
Yes.
county, so we have on our comprehensive plan, the extension of it through the town limits. Well, and that's because Doss Garland's already on the county plan. So they're just looking at new roadways, they're not looking at taking something gravel and make it into a paved road. Because Doss Garland is already it's already a road, but it's just gravel.
Right, but it's Doss Garland, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, but that's actually gonna be expanded, right? If the potential new development. would come.
Right.
It wouldn't be expanded, it would be tied into.
Okay,
Yeah, because we expanded through the property but that's on our plan. That's on our plan for an extended roadway, because Doss Garland ends at the town limits.
right.
But this is only for creating new roadways. It talks about improving turn lanes. So we could talk about improving Doss Garland.
I can double
On the
check
county side.
tomorrow
Okay.
and get back in touch with you.
On the home page of the Carroll County Department of Planning, you have links to what is the plan on there that's the sub area? Is that the draft of the Carroll County Transportation Plan?
Sub area. And Jim, maybe
Sure,
afterwards I
we
can
can
pull up
talk
my
to it,
EC
yeah.
and we can,
Yep.
sub area.
I'm not sure if it was the actual draft that we were looking at of the master plan. The transportation.
I was looking at,
master plan.
I did the clink, I just need to go home. The link on, the meeting, when they were having the commission meeting, that's the link I chose for the transportation master plan. When it was talking about the different plans within the municipalities, and maybe that's why it didn't talk about Dos Garland, because it's not within the municipalities.
That's what I'm guessing. I think we both looked at not what is the actual draft.
This is why
Okay.
I like paper.
Yeah, I know, I know.
If you would like, after the meeting concludes, I can pull up on my laptop.
It's something I
the
have way too much
information.
of.
We can go over that.
Sure.
Okay,
But that's all I have, Madam Chair, unless anyone else.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Thank you so much. Always good to see you.
Likewise.
Okay, is there any other business? Any public comment? Then may I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
And may I have a second?
Second it?
All those in favor?
Aye.
So adjourned. Thank you. This is interesting.